This is Cyber Sam, and let's teach tech. Back in the woods, reflecting on my week and the last few weeks of the beginning of the school year, and what keeps coming up in my head is the word communication. And a lot of the struggles I've been dealing with in regards to communication. So let's talk about it. I'll start with the technical issues I've continued to deal with. I've got a student lab and issues from not being able to re-image computers and not being able to install software correctly. And in hindsight, I'm close to having the issue fixed, I hope, but I think I could have done a better job, and the people I'm working with could have done a better job. It feels like a bit of Murphy's Law at this point, but little details like I've called tech support and weeks ago with a certain issue that was resolved yesterday, and I was not given one detail to make it work in the process of fixing the issue, which has been super frustrating because weeks ago I identified the issue, but I was not given a piece of the information that I needed. So many emails were sent and video meetings were made. I got my administration involved, and I don't necessarily have any answers. I'm not giving a tip right now. I'm just kind of relaying how things really can get screwed up when we don't communicate clearly. And I truly believe everyone's trying to do their best. I'm trying to do my best by documenting the issue and putting it in writing. I know the tech people are trying to do their best. They're swamped at the beginning of the school year, and they're trying to fix the things I'm asking them to fix, and my administration is trying to do their best to get involved because they know the frustrations for me as a teacher and for my students who are not able to do their work. Again, I think the root of the problem is communication. What comes to mind as a solution to this is always making sure we are communicating in a way that's effective for the receiver, not you, the sender. It's like teaching. We can't just say, I taught you, I lectured this information, therefore it's your job to receive it and process and understand what I said to you and learn. It's a two-way thing, but we really need to communicate for the receiver, whether in this case a technical issue and I'm needing IT to help, or as a teacher, the student. We need to clarify and make sure students are processing and receiving with formative assessment, checking for understanding. In a previous video, we've talked about being explicit with students, being crystal clear on asking students what they need from you as a teacher, what they need for the norms and environment for a safe space for learning, and then as a teacher expressing your needs in, for instance, having students' attention when we're trying to learn. After that's established, we can continuously practice day after day effective communication with students. This week I've had many one-on-one conversations with students, which has gone really well. After I get the class going for a week or so, or 2 weeks, I sit down with students one-on-one while they're working on projects and assignments, and I go through the welcome sheet. In that sheet, I ask them questions like, tell me a little bit about yourself, what activities you're involved in, what you like to do for fun, something interesting about yourself, why you took the course, what do you want to get out of the program, and do you think you can be successful? What do you need to do as a student to be successful? What do you need from me as an instructor to help you be successful? I find this to be a really good conversation one-on-one with students, to go over that sheet with them and again try to clearly define their needs, who they are, establish a relationship with them, And if a student is struggling at this point, then we need to dive deeper. So for instance, I have a student who's struggling attending class. And so we have these conversations, or had a conversation, we've had multiple, but about what her needs are, what's going on, how I can help, maybe communicating with the period before to maybe they need to get on the bus sooner, maybe they need a partner, maybe the student said, hey, if you could check in with me more often in class to make sure I'm getting what you're saying. And I say, I'm willing to do that. To a certain degree, I'm willing to do what I need to do to help you. And then we have conversations about how this is a two-way relationship, if you will. I can do, and I list all the things I'm doing to help, and then saying, the student needs to also put in the effort in regards to learning. And then this particular student wasn't really sure why they're in my program. So I have a goal map that we fill out at the beginning of the year. This is a great way for students to define the why. Why would you get on the bus and come to my class? Why would you make the effort to come here? What do you want to get out of this? As a teacher, I know my why, but if we help students define their why, then it can help them with the carrot or the reason to be here, reason to come to class. It could be to earn certifications. It could be to get a job. It could be to provide for your family. It could be to live a better lifestyle. It could be to help people. But that's their choice, and that's their reason to be here. So helping students, walking them through that process can be really, really effective. And you end up as a teacher able to focus in some respects more on your teaching instead of the behavior issues you might run into. The one-on-one meetings are great, or even just I chatted with the student after class yesterday and said, and I focus on the behaviors, not any emotional things. But I said, I'm noticing you're coming late to class. I'm noticing you've missed some classes. I notice when I look at your screen, you have other things on your screen than what we're doing in class. I noticed that you came to class kind of with this attitude of, I already know this stuff. But that day our assignment was due, our assessment, and it wasn't turned in at the end of class. As I was checking all the students and saying, hey, so-and-so, I don't have your assignment yet, your assessment. And I said the other day, when I did a formative assessment and I called your name, you didn't know the answer. And then I kept circling back to that student. And we would process the question as a class and come back to the student. And still wasn't getting it. A pretty simple concept. I'd hit a good 3 or 4 times at that point in the lesson. And, and he said, you're right, I'm going to try to do a better job focusing and getting here. And it was simply me pointing out the behaviors and communicating how that's affecting their learning. And you can tie that into their why. Why are you here? Well, how are you going to achieve your reason for being here when these behaviors are going on? So those are some ways I'm communicating with students at the beginning of the year to establish a relationship, to try to help them connect their behaviors to the outcome they want from the course and the program. I also made a deal with one of my students that's missed a lot of class that, hey, by next Friday, you and I need to sit down and figure out, because we're taking 7 college courses in the first semester. I have to say, I know I've dealt with this many times, that if you fail this, you have 7 failing college courses, credits, and that's gonna follow you forever. I don't want that for you. I don't think you want that for you. And some colleges won't accept you if you've already failed 7 course credits. Next week, this time, let's sit down and figure out. I'm gonna do the things that you talked about next week, but if you can't come to class and I can't check in with you one-on-one and I can't help you because you're not present, we probably need to talk about withdrawing on Friday if we can't do some of these basic things. But I'm trying to be upfront, I'm trying to be honest, but I'm trying to be factual and focus on the behaviors and communicate what can be done to make things better on both of our ends. Another really difficult thing to do these days is, I believe, sending and sharing information. I find that to be really tricky. So often we use Canvas, we use Teams. Even those systems, we think we're being clear, we think we might have all the information in a logical order and visually clear way and so on. But are students on the same page as you? Are you communicating, are you sharing this information in a way that it's effective for students? This is what got me, in my previous video, I shared my course guide. I call it a 1-pager of the main points of my class that's in a Word document online, and links to other things. That's what I've done to try to help with communication of all the things in a course. And that was based on students' feedback. They didn't want to even go to my LMS, go into Canvas or Blackboard or whatever. They just wanted, tell me what I need to do to pass. What do I need to do what work do you need from me? And of course, we have all these activities as teachers and a whole process of unpacking information and giving them this experience in our class with different activities and labs and so on. It's not to minimize all of that, but it's also our job to simply assess, do students understand things? Can a student show their understanding of a target or a unit without you because they came to the class knowing this stuff and you're wasting their time? So we want to communicate how students can show their understanding in a clear way and try to be flexible to some degree as an instructor. And because we're human beings, we need to think about communicating at an emotional level. There's a great book called Nonviolent Communication. I highly recommend. Really, really breaks down communicating effectively, getting to the root of people's needs, emotions, and tying those to the needs. Listening rather than telling people what they want or need, letting them express that and you kind of reflecting that. Great book. But if students are struggling in your course, what can you provide for social emotional learning to help them? What can you provide or what can you do to identify their needs behind the behaviors? That's a tough one. But if we ask good questions, if we develop a relationship with students, if we focus on their needs and maybe not so much taking things personally of what they say and what they do, we're likely to get to the result we both want, the student and the instructor, in a much more effective way. Another tip I'll throw out there that I know other instructors have used that I'm going to add to my course, I haven't done it yet, is getting feedback from students through like a suggestion box. So it could be in class physically, or it could be a link to a forum, an anonymous forum online. And instead of getting course feedback and instructor feedback at the end of the course, after the fact, let's ask for it at the beginning, like I talked about with one-on-one feedback. I've asked students, last year I recorded all my classes because it was remote. I could just click record. This year I'm back to face-to-face, and when students miss class, it becomes much more of an issue. And at this point, I have my LMS, but I'm connected to that course guide, and my presentations and activities are all in that presentation software like PowerPoint. So I said to my students, I've got a lot of students who are missing randomly here and there. What can I do? What do you need from me as an instructor to make sure you know what you need to do to make up? I honestly didn't get a whole lot of feedback, but we need to ask those questions. A suggestion box is a great way throughout the course to say, hey, anytime you have a suggestion for me to make your experience better in this class, this will be put anonymously, and you can set up an alert that you'll receive an email when that form is filled out. I'm embarrassed how long it took me to sit down with students and sit down with a piece of paper and a pen, give them time to give feedback on the course, write it down, and then I sat down and gave each student, I timed it, I think I gave them 1 or 2 minutes and said, okay, I'm gonna give you 1 or 2 minutes, and I want you to just tell me what can make this class and this program better. I got some great ideas, and that really affected the next school year. The next time I did the courses, the students had such a better experience because I listened to my students. This can help out so much if we're doing it throughout the school year, throughout the course, because let's face it, we're all working really hard. We've all thought really hard about our courses and what to do and become experts in our fields and become expert teachers. And it's frustrating to work so hard and not be effective. So getting that student feedback can help you think of it like an agile process. We can check our users, see if what we're doing is working, and tweak more fluidly along the way rather than at the end of the semester or finding out later when students are failing or not doing well and understanding what we need. It's very similar to formative assessment in a lesson, but we can get feedback on the course itself and develop that communication all along the way. I might have said this in a previous video, but I've also told students that if you're having a bad day, I want you to communicate that to me, because I'm going to push you as a teacher. If I see you not engaged, I'm going to come up to you and say, what's going on? And I'm going to try to push you to be engaged and focused and staying involved and learning. But we're real people and life happens. And if we're having a bad day, it's fair that students can communicate that with us. And telling students up front that, hey, I understand we can have a bad day. I'd appreciate if you just tell me that. If I come up to you and you don't want to be pushed because something's going on in your life, tell me that, and I'll back off. And students seem to really respect that and appreciate that you're treating them as humans and communicating that both ways. We work in PLCs in my building, and I have to ask questions like, what's the best way to communicate in our PLC? Because these days the way to share information is just insane. We have our learning management system, we have email, we have texting, we have, in our school teams, our students and parents have, in our case, Infinite Campus, so we can send messages that way. We have another tool that's able to convert in different languages the messages, and our district wants us using that as well. All these ways of communicating are great. It's also not realistic to use them all, and also adds a ton of confusion if all of us have to check all of these systems all the time to get a communication. So my PLC, for instance, said just email, use email. But students, on the other hand, for the most part, if I want to communicate with a student, they want to use Teams because it's more like texting on their phones. Most of them have phones. So ask students, what's the best way to communicate? And then maybe they all can come to an agreement. It's not necessarily that you need to individualize everything, because that's not realistic. But if you don't ask the question, if you dictate, hey, I'm only going to email you, you have to be responsible and check your email, you're dictating that. And if that doesn't work for them overall, you're not being effective, you're being stubborn, and it's not going to work. And students aren't going to check their email in general. Students don't necessarily love checking email. So ask the questions to be effective. And in the end, again, it'll be a win-win for everyone if we simply communicate and ask good questions so that we can be effective instructors and effective communicators. Another way I've been communicating lately with all my technical issues is to tell my students, hey, I apologize when things aren't working. I empathize and say, this is frustrating. And I communicate what's going on behind the scenes. So they know I'm not just being a lazy person who doesn't care, but I try to communicate, hey, this is what's going on behind the scenes. I've got these processes and people and things going on. I know it's really frustrating, but we're gonna get there soon. Thank you for your patience and all of that. But communicating, they might just see the end result of things not available, not working, or whatever. So it doesn't hurt to communicate your process. It also doesn't hurt to communicate things like, oh man, I'm frustrated today, or man, I'm tired today. This is what's happened to me. Maybe share a personal story so students can know you're human and that you might be having a bad day. And maybe they'll react and back off or behave, stay on task more, who knows? One frustration I have in my teacher meetings is when someone just starts talking and expecting me to remember everything that was said. And one argument would be, well, you're an adult and you need to take notes or whatever. But if I don't know I'm supposed to take notes, then there's just confusion. And so I find myself this year, I'm catching myself where I'm talking, but there aren't words on the screen, on the whiteboard, or whatever. They're backing up what I'm saying. I strongly encourage you for the vast majority of time to say things, but make sure there are words on the screen. Pictures. Keep in mind, we have ESL students, English as a second language. And students are having to process all the things that are coming at them. And that might be really hard for them. So if you have the words on the screen, you're really, really helping them out. We need to be thinking about what's effective communication when it comes to online teaching, hybrid teaching, face-to-face teaching. What is the most effective ways of doing that? Because it's different. What's the most effective way of communicating and teaching? Is it written, reading, writing? Is it a picture? Is it a video? Is it hands-on? Likely it's all of those things in the end. A well-rounded lesson and a well-rounded curriculum and program is not going to just be hands-on, even though in our career technical education we really focus on hands-on. It's not just that. Taking 3 hours to set up a server might not be the most effective use of time when it comes to learning what needs to be taught in a certain field. That's all part of effectively communicating what we're trying to teach as instructors. Those are deep thoughts. It's not easy, but we want to be effective and we want to use the best tools available to make the best use of our time. I, for instance, am moving myself to the cloud after spending a ridiculous amount of time with my own server room and trying to maintain that with student help. I'm not losing it, but I'm going to start using the cloud more, so I'm not having to deal with technical issues, and I can focus on student learning and students showing me they can understand and configure things a certain way and do what I'm asking. So that's just one example of how we can be more effective with our time. Random funny story, I was in a professional development meeting and the person presenting was going like, here. The person presenting was going like this. And pointing at at the things on the board or whatever. And I was like, that was effective. I don't think it was, I'm almost certain that person had no idea they were using their middle finger, but I should try it. Or you could start the year and make it the elephant in the room, that you are the instructor who points at things with their middle finger, and see if any student points it out. But it really got my attention and I thought it was pretty funny. I would love for you to share how you communicate with your students, how you are effective, what things you've learned as a teacher to give yourself and students a better experience. Please share it in the comments. This is Cyber Sam for Let's Teach Tech. We'll see you next time.